You're listening to Soap Dirt, the latest in television entertainment news.
Hey, YNR fans. Oh my gosh, I'm so thrilled that they have changed Heather's cause of death and are now saying it's blunt force trauma instead of drowning. What a mess. And now Sharon is trying to set up Daniel to take the fall for the killing. It's Belinda from Soap Dirt. And let's talk about these hot new spoilers for next week. And I've also got some exciting behind the scenes photos of a huge event upcoming for Sweeps that kicks off later this month on Young and the Restless. Hey, please subscribe if you're not following us. Let's dive in. I've got spoilers for next week for Jack and Diane, for Sharon trying to cover up her bad deed, and also for Chance, who is back on the force at the GCPD investigating Heather Stevens' murder. Yay. So glad they're not trying to pass it off as accidental drowning. So if you've not seen Friday's YNR episode yet, just real quick, here's what you need to know about Sharon killing Heather and the cause of death and all. Initially, they told Daniel at the morgue that Heather drowned. And I was just like, no way. Crime scene 101, she'd have no water in her lungs because she was killed at the apartment. And we had a lot of great comments and debate right here when I did that video about that hinky cause of death. And people were wondering if she might have still been barely alive when she was tossed in and sucked in water. And that's how she, wound up drowning. So I'm glad it was all cleared up. They finally did an autopsy, and I don't know why at the morgue they would even tell Daniel a cause of death before the autopsy was complete, but we'll let that slide. So Chance heard that Heather died from Phyllis at the GCAC when she approached him with Summer. He went off to check in with the GCPD and then came to tell Daniel that Heather didn't drown. It was blunt force trauma. And all we saw was her kind of cutting her head on something, but they didn't say, an injury, like a cut. So maybe while Sharon was blacked out in that fugue state, she bashed her head repeatedly into the floor. I mean, we don't know exactly what she did to Heather, but Phyllis is very upset. And on Friday, Sharon approached her at the GCAC with condolences and this and that. And Phyllis lashed out and said she would never forget Sharon attacking her family. And then Chance said he's going back to work at the GCPD. So obviously that's the setup for next week when he's got his job back. Let's get into these spoilers. I'm going to talk about Jack and Diane real quick and then get into the juicy murdery stuff. So Diane is at the GCAC, I think, with her hubby Jack. Things have already been tense with them this past week. If you recall, she suggested that it was time that they replace Kyle because he's clearly not coming back to Jabot. And Jack snapped at her that she cares more about business than their son, and he was very rude to her. So next week, Diane turns around and loses it on Jack. She claps back at him saying, I don't think you have ever fully committed to the fact that I've changed, that I'm not the same manipulative bitch that I used to be. Jack's like, Diane, come on. And Diane's like, no, I'm sick of it. And she walks out. Good for her. Of interest is this week, I was rewatching some 2002 episodes of when Diane first came back to Genoa City with baby Kyle when Jack was married to Phyllis, and he was sneaking DNA samples from the baby to test so he could pursue a custody case against her. It's so wild seeing Jack and Diane, bickering over Kyle 22 years later. So now to the juicy killer stuff. So as Friday's episode ends, Sharon got into the trunk of her SUV where she has Heather's overnight bag stashed, and there's those bloody rags in there from when she wiped up the crime scene. If you thought she was just going to dump them in the woods or in the river, think again. So Cameron is in Sharon's ear this week about making Daniel pay. Originally, remember, he wanted Sharon to kill him, but now it seems like Sharon's going to make Daniel pay in another way coming into the following week. Sharon still has Heather's house keys, remember? So next week, she sneaks back into Daniel's apartment. She hides the bloody rags in that cabinet in the living room. And Sharon has in her hand a phone that I have to assume is Heather's phone. I don't know. She has it in her hand while she's shoving the rags in there, but I can't tell if she also leaves the phone. I assume not because she had her bare hand on it, but we'll see. That cell phone is important though. So also, just real quick, be sure to hang around to the end for those behind the scenes photos of that big thing. So next week, it looks like Chance is officially a GCPD detective again and working the case, which should be a huge conflict of interest because the victim was at odds with Sharon, whom Chance had a fling with not that long ago. But, you know, conflict of interest never matters on soaps because the cast is too small. So Chance is at Daniel's apartment next week and tells him he tried to trace the location of Heather's phone and something surprising came up. Lucy wants to know what happens now, and as Chance is leaving, he says he has one more person to question. If you recall, Cameron praised Sharon after she killed Heather because he said she turned off the location and tracking on Heather's phone when she brought it back to her place. But that's not going to help her because Daniel texted the phone and Sharon texted back pretending to be Heather. And that means Sharon had Heather's phone turned on and active in order to send and receive those texts. So it should absolutely have pinged on whatever cell tower was closest to the Newman Ranch where Sharon lives. So I wonder if this one person that Chance needs to question is Sharon. At that point, clearly the bloody rags haven't been found, or Chance would have been questioning Daniel probably down at the GCPD interrogation room. We all know that in most murder cases, the first suspect they pursue is the boyfriend, the husband, the girlfriend, the wife. Always the partner is always the top and first suspect. But there should be none of Daniel's DNA on those bloody rags. You know, Sharon should have transferred some while handling them. But if they bring in forensics guys and use luminol, you know, that stuff they spray and it makes the blood glow, Daniel's apartment should light up like a Christmas tree because Sharon didn't use any bleach to clean up that blood. Hopefully, Chance is not going to arrest Daniel, but that might be what we see, at least as a preliminary suspect. But once Phyllis hears that Heather was murdered, she's going to raise hell. And I have no doubt she will accuse Sharon, saying she was the only person in town who had any grudge against Heather. Nick is not going to want to believe it, and Chance, as Sharon's ex, may not want to believe it. But once Sharon is cornered, if they get her into the GCPD and she's grilled, I cannot imagine she could stand up to that scrutiny. I imagine that she would cave because she's so just mentally fragile right now. All right, now, those behind the scenes photos of an upcoming event. I believe it is Abby and Devon's wedding that was taped recently, judging by these photos. First photo, we got Victor, Abby, and Lily. Melissa Ordway is in a sparkly white gown that looks kind of like slinky bridal wear to me. Crystal Khalil is in a nice dressy lavender dress, and Eric Braden's all done up in a tux, looking very father of the bride. And if you look at the floral arrangements above and beside them, those scream wedding. The only other upcoming event we know of is Billy's Abbott Chancellor launch, and that does not look like a business event. Another behind the scenes photo has Eric Braden next to Bryton James, and Devon is looking quite handsome in a suit, looking very groom-like, assuming to marry his love and mother of his son, Abby. There's another photo with Braden, Melody, Scott Thomas, and Amelia Heinel. Vicky is also in a lavender gown, so I do wonder if she and Lily might be bridesmaids since they are in similar colors, and one's the sister of the bride and one's the sister of the groom. And the last photo is gorgeous Sean Dominic buttoning himself into a very dressy white shirt. So maybe Nate is going to be Devon's best man. We'll just have to wait and see.
Thank you for being a loyal listener. Follow us wherever you get your podcast, because you don't want to miss the next episode. Soap Dirt is on all the major podcast platforms, including Apple Podcast, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and more.